Welcome to Loving God and Loving Life. We're in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, where the theme is questions of conscience. In case you haven't seen this theme throughout the book, he's dealing a lot with our brains, our thought life, because again, Corinth is in Greece, kind of the center of wisdom and seeking knowledge here, and they kind of had that tendency to put their brains on top of their hearts, and wisdom was more important than love to them. He's getting an interesting question here, though, because many of them had these questions. Their conscience was bothering them, and maybe in this church, this was a bigger issue than most, again, because they're leaning on their brains so much that they had an overly sensitive conscience. And that's really what Paul was dealing with here. He says those with an oversensitive, they would think they're the people with the greatest faith, but actually he said it's backwards. If you have an oversensitive conscience, it's actually going to be, you're constantly going to be condemned. And he's bringing up an instance here and this instance doesn't really relate to us today, talking about eating food that had been sacrificed earlier to idols. It's hard for us to even comprehend the scenario that Paul was setting up, but what is universal is this oversensitive conscience. And Paul's point, his bottom line is this, that we as believers, our paramount issue is the hearts and the lives of others, how our activity is affecting others. And if we're around somebody else who has a sensitive conscience, how are we going to act? Let's just say in our life, here's an example that could work. Say that you used to, before you knew Christ, were an alcoholic. And the bar you used to go to was Chili's. You were at Chili's all the time, just getting blasted. No, for some people, after they've surrendered to Christ and he's changed them, they might feel it's a sin to even go to the restaurant. Now, can you imagine that? So answer the question. Is it a sin to go to the restaurant Chili's? Well, you think, well, of course not. That's craziness. But for that person, the restaurant might represent, they might not be able to separate that old experience and that bar from the restaurant. That's probably a little bit better connection with this thought that Paul's getting to them. And Paul's saying that if you're with that person, don't go there. Don't go there. Their heart is worth more. Your freedom to go to Chili's, you having the correct knowledge that it's not wrong to go there, that was really the bottom line of this chapter. The bottom line is prefer that person and prefer them. Don't go, even though you're right. Being right isn't how you're right. Wisdom doesn't prevail. Love prevails. Do what's best for that person. Don't go. Don't go to the restaurant. Don't go, at least not when they're around. Don't go. Why? Because you love them more than you love being right. That's really one of the themes of this entire book, and I hope that we get that. We want to love. Love prevails for us. Love prevails over our own brains, and that's the life that Christ calls us to, a life lived out of our heart and lived by love. God, send us one person today to share your love with. Gang, that's the love that we want to live with. And it's living that life of love. Loving God is the only way to end up with a life that you truly, truly love.